Be careful.
When am I not?
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? And today we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 1 Remake. And one thing in particular I would really like to put in here real quick is, in fact, that I actually had to
Ain't been
download
out here in
the
a while.
2-hour demo for the remake.
Well,
But you
I
can
ain't
also
no
stream it
romantic
as you
guy.
see fit if you are on PlayStation 5. But to much further ado, I'm going to be talking about basically why I think that this game is still absolutely amazing. It absolutely is. But more so, what we're going to be talking about today
Where's the ladder?
is
Gotta be
I'm
around
going to
here
be
somewhere.
discussing some of the improvements that this remake was actually able to do, other than it being the same game with a new coat of paint, as it were. And first and foremost, what I've really noticed in this remake is the rendering with its volumetric lighting and its interior and exterior design of the game itself. And I love the way how the lighting just really interacts with certain types of objects within the game, and being able to bounce off certain areas. So that's really cool. That's one thing I've definitely really noticed as well. Now, with the gunplay, I would say it's very interesting because what they were actually able to do is utilize the haptic feedback on the PlayStation 5 controller, which is really cool. I actually really enjoy the haptic feedback. And what they were able to do, I felt like that while playing this demo of the remake, the stabilization was there while using the haptic feedback, and that was really cool as to why I think that really helps the game itself, because it is the remake. They actually ended up making this game from the ground up for the PlayStation 5. That's really cool as well, and I thought that the mechanics of the haptic feedback was very, like I said, it was stabilized very well, it was fluid. And so I think that's what really made this remake very interesting as a whole, and being able to utilize that. So that's really cool as well. Now, one thing in particular I would really like to address here, though, too, there's one thing I've really noticed within the remake is that the characters, especially with Joel or Ellie or with Tess, or any other NPCs that you will go throughout the rest of this entire game, they are more lifelike to their somewhat maybe human counterparts that do the acting or the voice acting of these characters, and they actually look really nice. They really up the HD graphics and the pixelization, and that's one thing I've really greatly noticed as well when it came to making this game a little bit more lifelike. I thought while going back and replaying the remastered version on the PlayStation 4 through the backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5, I'm going to say the PS4 version still holds up. And one thing I would also like to say is that when it came to the remastered version of the PS4 of The Last of Us, the game, like I said, the game still holds up. But however, what I'm saying is that, with Joel or with Ellie or with Tess, these characters still look great, whether if you're playing the PS4 version or if you want to go ahead and get the remake. By all means, I think it's a really good, stellar outing in that particular fashion when it comes to the PlayStation 5 utilizations of its hardware systems and everything else. So, another thing though too is that they really did a good job of updating their character models. That's one thing I've also greatly noticed as well. I really like the way how they were able to utilize that, make it more interesting and robust in its own unique way, and you're able to see the hairs on certain types of NPCs. You're able to see their more facial structure and their movements of the person themselves, and I think that's what's really cool about that as well. And as I previously stated, that they did some more improved lighting effects, and it's the reason what I previously mentioned with the volumetric lighting involved in this remake, and they did a really good job with that as well. I'm really impressed with the volumetric lighting in this game, whether if you're in interior or exterior design of the game itself, and that's what really makes this game really stand out from the remastered version on the PlayStation 4. Another thing I've also noticed, though, too, is the frames per second. The frames per second is solid. I have never seen a remake that has done so well when it comes to its frames per second, per se, I would say, because, most of the time when I have played more games in the past, or even the newer games that we have today, the frames per second, sometimes I've always seen them dip, but they will eventually come back up again. So that's one thing I would really greatly have to admit. It definitely makes the frames per second in The Last of Us Part 1 remake much more smoother and fluid, so if that makes sense. And then another thing I've actually really greatly noticed within this remake is the screen tearing. I have had numerous PS4 games or even other games on previous gen. There were some screen tearing involved when it comes to games because it all has to do with the frames per second involved within that specific typeset game. So that's what's really interesting though too. Now, as I previously mentioned about the haptic feedback with the controls with the PlayStation 5 utilization controller, it definitely makes the shooting more immersive, and I really love the response time. I love the way how everything just works with its whole entire way of being able to be a little bit more interesting and robust in its own unique way of its combat systems. And I think that's what really makes the haptic feedback. It really helps with the weapon shooting, with the response time, and the immersion along with that. Now, last but not least, we are going to be talking about the crafting. I think when it came to the crafting in The Last of Us Part 1 Remake is, in fact, that they did a little bit differently than from what they initially did with the remastered version or with the PS3 version. And what I mean by that, they were actually able to bring back The Last of Us Part 2 crafting mechanic. Yes, you heard me correctly. They brought back the mechanic of crafting from what you were able to do that in The Last of Us Part 2. And to me personally, it still it works great. I did a little bit of it, not too much of it, because like I previously mentioned, this was only a 2-hour demo. And this is basically what I'm talking about when it comes to a demo rather than being a full game. So I think when it came to the crafting in The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, as I previously mentioned, the mechanics are, it's still the same. Like I previously mentioned, it still has the same coat of paint from the previous generation of The Last of Us Part 1 remastered. But overall, to me personally, I really think that the original PS3 version or the PS4 version of The Last of Us, it still holds up as I previously mentioned. The crafting system is still really good, but if you really want to get more of a better experience when it comes to a game that has a new coat of paint built from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, I would definitely go with The Last of Us Part 1 Remake. So, alright guys, so that is my opener here for this game, and what I really want to talk about this game in general is that I really think this game, as I previously mentioned, this game still holds up. This game really looks absolutely magnificent when it comes to the PlayStation 5 hardware, and it's amazing as to why I think this game is one of the most important games in the gaming industry, amongst others. And they really did, I have to admit it, they did a really good job with this remake, because normally I don't always like remakes. And I have made a video on the Dead Space remake not too long ago, as of earlier this year, and I think that's where I feel like, no, not this year, it was last year, excuse me. And so I'm saying, this is why I think remakes are not always the best idea, but I think when it comes to The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, or when it came to The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, I think that these are the two best remakes I have ever played, bar none. There's no question about it, because, I mean, I think when it comes to the character models and the way how Tess looks, she kind of looks like Annie Wershing, which, rest in peace, by the way, or should I say, requiescat in pace. And so I think this game looks absolutely stunning. I love how everything, how this game really works, and it's astonishing what developers are able to do when it comes to the newer generation of hardware, whether if you're on PC, Xbox, or on PlayStation 5. But in all agreement, I really think that oh my god, I still can't get I'm still awestruck as to how they were able to do this. It's amazing, and this is the reason why I'm a gamer. I love games, I'm very passionate about it, and this is the reason why I make these types of videos. And I really think that if they were able to do more remakes, I think that they should do it from the ground up rather than just like doing a total remaster, in my personal opinion. Opposite that of, they did a Resident Evil 3 remake, they did a Resident Evil 2 remake, and they also did the Resident Evil 4 remake as well, which I did not play, but I know that it got a lot of praise. But however, I do probably maybe want to get that game eventually, but as of right now, I'm more excited for Rise of the Ronin, and I think I might actually end up maybe making a couple of videos on Rise of the Ronin, or, you know, just talk about the game and why I think the game is going to be absolutely amazing. But heretofore, we are talking about this remake for The Last of Us, because I can't get enough of this game. And that is why I think that when it comes to, I believe when it really comes to remakes, they're not always the best idea, in my personal opinion. But however, I think when it comes to The Last of Us Part 1 remake or the Dead Space remake, you want to be able to know how you're able to do it right. I really think that when it came to the Dead Space 1 remake or the Last of Us remake as well, they did a really good job with it. I mean, other than it's a fresh new coat of paint, but they did so many different types of changes than what the PS4 version or the PS3 version weren't able to provide, because they were the old generation of hardware type of software games. And I think that's where I think that's completely where the remake really does a really good job. And so what I'm saying here is that I really think that if you want to get a total better immersion when it comes to a remake like The Last of Us or Dead Space, you're not gonna get it any better other than, you know, like the previous versions, because it's everything what they were able to do with today's technology. And it's fascinating as to why they were able to do what they did with this remake, and it's just awesome. And so one thing I would really like to say is that, you know, everything still feels great. I mean, the combat, the gunplay, everything all about this game is still there. And that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with this game in general, but more so the story. I think the story in the Last of Us Part 1, in my personal opinion, it's still the best. Opposite that of Part 2. While I did enjoy Last of Us Part 2, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it for the second time around previously, and because it's like, you know, I still kind of wanted to figure out what my perspective on that game was. And then I finally realized something, that it's not as bad as a lot of people think it out to be, in my personal opinion. But however, that is one thing I really want to admit about something as well. But one thing I've actually did notice when it comes to this remake is, in fact, are the shivs. The shivs are really they're more different, should I say. They're more different. It's basically a piece of rebar that they were able to do, along with like a handle to it. But they did it differently. And that's another thing I've noticed when it comes to the crafting system in this game. Even though that they did implement some Part 2 crafting system mechanic in this game of the remake. But however, it's the shivs that really stood out, though, too, of course. Because as I previously mentioned, you have a handle and then you have a piece of freaking rebar. Right? And that's where I'm saying they did some nice changes. They did some really good changes. I actually like these changes because it's like, if you're, like as previously mentioned, when it comes to the Dead Space remake, I really think they did a lot of things in the remake for Dead Space differently than they were be able to really initially do in its original version. And that's why I'm saying, if you really want to get a full experience, you can play The Last of Us Part 1 or The Last of Us Remastered on PS4, or you can play the game on PS3 if you have the PS3 still. But however, if you're on newer generation of hardware, especially on the PlayStation 5, I do highly recommend the remake for Last of Us Part 1. No doubt. No doubt. So that's what I wanted to talk about here today. I really wanted to really delve deep into the mechanics of this game a little bit, and that's what I normally like to do when it comes to gaming in general, because I think when it comes to video games, I don't always do a very good job when it comes to, talking about the story. I love talking about the utilization and the concepts and the gameplay aesthetic of every single game that I play. Whether if it's old generation of games or newer generational, like The Last of Us Part 1 remake or the Dead Space remake. But it's important to me. And so I really think that's why I'm so passionate. But Anyways, one thing in final here, I really think that I would really love to see more remakes that are able to utilize a better way of being a proper remake. I think when it comes to remakes, they are tough to do. They are really tough to do because you have to have better code, you have to have better rendering, you have to have better lighting and effects, you have to have a whole lot to deal with. And it's not just that, it's the fact that it's the engine that's involved. And as I previously mentioned when I made my Dead Space 1 remake video not too long last year after it came out, is that they were actually able to utilize the Frostbite engine to its potential of making the Dead Space remake so good and lifelike in a unique way. But it was the volumetric lighting, it was the light and shadow effects, it was the audio, it was the visuals, it's everything that what makes these games stand out to the test of time when it comes to the newer generation of hardware. And that's where I'm saying, and that is why I am so passionate about this. I have always been so passionate, but when it comes to gaming, I have always been passionate because it's not just about the story of a game. It's more on the lines of its visual aesthetic, its visual art style, the way how they were able to implement everything to make this game see fit, to make it how it's going to look, how it's going to provide better gameplay aesthetics to it, as I previously mentioned, and that is what makes this game so good. This is the reason why I love games, video games. Whether if I'm on Nintendo Switch, whether if I'm on Xbox Series X or S, or whether if I'm on PlayStation 5. And there's one thing I really want to say something here real quick. I am not a Sony pony. I am not an Xbox pony. I am not a PC pony. I'm not.
What was that?
And so what I'm saying is that this fanboy pony shit that's been going on lately, it's ridiculous. It's stupid. But I get it, because that's where the YouTubers really get their credit. They get their credit where it's due. That's how they make money on YouTube. But anyways, I just want to put that out there. My apologies. I know you didn't really want to hear that. So I'm not going to worry about that anymore. But anyways, this is Jake from Citizen JV. Thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. Any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Be more than happy to reply back if and whenever possible. And you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Peace.